Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the strategy session here at Resolute Square. I am so glad you joined us tonight. I am so glad to have been joined by Joe Trippi, famous Democratic political consultant, mastermind of many things that have changed politics fundamentally, and also Stuart Stevens, the grand guru of the former Republican Party, a guy who's seen more things in presidential campaigns than you can shake a stick at. Thanks for being with us tonight, folks, because we are going to go into something, a subject near and dear to many people's hearts, and that is how Joe Biden can win. Because there's been too much doom and gloom, too much depression, black cloud Eeyore shit for the last couple of weeks. And frankly, it's becoming a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. We're tired of it. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about how the Democrats and Joe Biden can use the Republican primary to build up Joe Biden and how Biden can beat Donald Trump. We're going to put aside some of these polls we've been seeing out there and put them in the ash heap of history and have a little bit of an upbeat talk tonight. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the Nikki Haley bubble, Ron DeSantis, and Giving Tuesday. So with that, I will lead out Stuart. Talk to me about how Joe Biden wins this thing.
Well, look, I think when this becomes a choice, Biden's, what are perceived as weaknesses of Biden's now can be converted to strengths. So I think a lot of that happened in 2020. You know, all of a sudden, a guy who had run for president before, had been in the Senate forever, was not a new face, experience became a desirable quality. All of a sudden, the fact that he was not the sexiest of candidates, that he wasn't running just on charisma, but that became competence. The fact that someone cared about governing became important. And I think that with the world in chaos now, this idea of an American president who is steady, who is
Yep.
predictable, who is not new, and you know what he's going to do. I think there's an old fashioned appeal to this. There's kind of a retro appeal to Joe Biden in this moment. And I think that people are going to find that reassuring. And I think it's going to be a case of he is going to be the safer, more predictable, more reliable choice. And I think that's a good matchup.
I do think that's a big part of it. And a lot of our Democratic friends are in what I call polling panic right now. How do you persuade them that the numbers are not as dire and panic worthy as the mainstream press would have them believe?
Well, Joe, you should. You're the guy that predicted
Actually, Joe. Actually,
Yeah.
Joe. Let's put that one on your
the two
plate.
race was going to be. You're the
Yeah.
guy that called the 22 race before
Well,
when
look,
everybody was panicked about it.
yeah, I just think that, first of all, you can't convince Democrats to not worry and panic. That's like not worth trying to do.
That's why we love you, Joe.
Yeah, no, it's just not. It's the hand
It's
wringing
like
party.
Seinfeld.
Yeah, but look, I think Stuart, you put your finger on it. It's the contrast that in 2020, the contrast with Trump's chaos and and Joe Biden's basically calm, get it done, get results kind of attitude. That contrast, and people just sick of the chaos. They were already tiring of it,
Right.
and so that contrast, one, I think, is what sustained Biden even through the primaries, where no one thought, "Oh my God," after Iowa, New Hampshire, he's dead. No, people gravitated
Right.
and moved towards the calm seriousness of Biden. I think it's that same contrast between Trump and MAGA, um, and Democrats, Biden leading it, getting the work done in 2022 that stopped the red wave. Same contrast, and I think that exact same contrast will be there again. Is there, but it'll be more stark as Trump comes onto the scene and the Republican primaries move forward. But I also think there's a difference, and that is the ceiling that Trump's always had a low ceiling, whether it's 46,
Right.
47% somewhere there. But I think that ceiling has drifted much lower. I mean, into 44, 45 range, which means that contrast is working actually will work more powerfully for Biden in terms of what votes are available. One, and which actually means that the biggest threat here, I think, is not Trump. And we've talked about this, and I've said it before. I think Trump's going to be a weaker nominee than he's been in either
Right.
2016 or 2020. The real threat then isn't whether Biden can out 44 or 45 Donald Trump. He will and he can. The real threat are things like no labels and this whole group of third parties that are getting mysterious funding out there with a lot of connections to Trump money.
Sure.
But in the end, I still think. I think we'll all do our jobs, expose that, and Biden is going to be much stronger. I think it will be a bigger margin that we saw in 2020.
I have no hate for that answer. That's it. I mean, and I do think that's one of the things that is necessary to move this whole discussion down the road and to end MAGA and Trumpism is it's got to be a crushing defeat. It can't just be, a lot of Democrats right now are hoping to skate past the barn. I think we ought to encourage people to really go at this as a fight where you should be going for the absolute destruction of Trump and his party, the absolute an electoral wipeout at a historic level, which I don't think is out of the question. And I have been pondering something we talked about in the last show about how the economic good news is going to take a while to slither into people's heads and take root.
Right.
I'm actually starting to hear some anecdotal stuff out there now that Republicans are worried because gas prices are going down. They're worried because the soft landing story hit. The Trump people were trying to spin earlier this week that the soft landing isn't real. There's still going to be a big recession.
Yeah.
Interesting bet.
Well, we're now into 60-something days of gas prices continuing
Right.
to go lower, and a lot of analysts expect that to continue through the end of the year at least.
Right.
You got something like 16 states where gas prices are under $3 now. I think the national average is $3.25,
Yep.
which goes back to 2020 numbers when, by the way, Trump was president. We've talked about this in the past. If you've been through a presidential campaign coming out in which there's been a tough economic time, whether that was the Great Recession under Obama or even the inflation, really big inflation hit that happened under Carter and the first 2.5 years of Reagan, what happens is, when that sour, down in the dumps, depressive mood
Right.
takes hold, and it takes 6 to 9 months for the good news to actually start, for people actually start feeling it. And that's the one thing that's always sort of bucked me up in terms of thinking about this, because those economic numbers that, yes, people go, why is he talking about Bidenomics? I don't feel that. They're starting to feel it. I think that's why you're hearing this anecdotal stuff, Rick. And that means with a year left here, we're maybe 3 to 6 months away, I think, from voters, consumers actually feeling it in their paycheck, actually feeling it in lower gas prices and other things. You're seeing confidence start to go up again. And again, like you look at the jobs, the jobs record is just continues to be mind blowing. When you
mind blowing.
when you look at the number of jobs that have been created under Joe Biden, and you compare that even to the Clinton years, but then you go back and you look at, I think it's a paltry. Trump had created I think 1.9 million jobs were created in the entire 4 years where Trump was president. It was something on a scale much
Actually,
different than that.
Joe, actually, Trump was the first president,
I think we have a graphic about
the
that.
only president.
Yeah, I do. Let's bring that graphic up.
Trump's the only president that there were fewer jobs when he left office than when he took office. That had never happened before in America.
Yeah, here it is. Look at
This
this.
is a little skewed because you're lumping Trump and Bush together.
Right. Bush is
Trump
taking advantage, or Trump is taking advantage of the Bush boom.
Yeah.
that that
No, and I
9/11.
think actually they declined on Trump's watch, but we'll give him the
Yeah.
1.9. Then you look at the Democrats, Clinton, Obama, and Biden, and it's amazing numbers.
And
You know,
and
I
and
think
the
part of
fact,
I
go
think
ahead.
part
Go
of
ahead,
what's
Steve.
going on here is that um, a lot of our friends in the political industrial class are looking at this as if this was a, say, 2000 race, a 2008 race,
Mm-hmm.
um, even
Yeah.
2012. On election day in 2012, Romney and Obama both had favorables of 50%. So
Yep.
when are we going to see that again? I mean,
Yeah.
I doubt
I'm not
ever.
sure any of us are going to be alive. Or, I just think the country has changed so much that when you look at that and that becomes the bar for an incumbent, well, you got to get to 50%. Well, not really. I mean, look at the unfavorables that Trump had when he won in 16. And we all said that was impossible. So I think there's just a different world out there. All polling is based on modeling. I
Right.
think that's why the polling has been off so much. And we're just in a very, very different world.
Well, also,
Yeah.
as we talked about with polls right now, the polls are more like feeling thermometers now. It's that the way you feel that at that day. And by the way, everybody, as you've pointed out, Stuart, everybody hates everybody now. I mean, you look at leaders all around the world, their numbers are in actually Joe Biden's numbers are higher than any,
Anybody
leader.
else in a Western democracy?
Yeah. So, but it's like, hey, I don't like prices. There's chaos in the world. I'm upset. Blame Biden. That's typical. But sooner or later, as Biden has pointed out, uh, it's not comparison to the Almighty. It's comparison to the alternative, and
Yep.
that's where that stark contrast between not just Trump, but the speaker. MAGA Mike Johnson, the abortion bans, all the and the threats to democracy that they carry out every single day or enable or genuflect to Trump on every level of the revenge tour. That's all that contrast. They've done. You got to give credit to the Trump team in that they have kept him from being the day to day crazy focus that he always was. But that's those days are about to end as we enter into the closing days here as he starts lashing out to Nikki Haley or against DeSantis or anybody else, and I don't think they'll be able to contain him. I think they've actually done a relatively good. I mean, first of all, it's a much better team that he has this time.
Oh, by
We
far.
Yeah, but I don't think they'll be able to sustain it. He's that crazy contrast, that chaos is going to be a big reminder. And then I still look at what Biden's been able to accomplish, even though he's taking arrows on both sides in Israel and Gaza, and the take on the Hamas
Right.
attack, but when you look at the diplomatic job that's been done to get these hostages released, to
Oh,
extend a truce,
horrific.
and to continue to do that, it just shows what that calm diplomacy, not screaming me, can do. And I think that contrast over time,
Yeah,
uh,
Rick,
you're going to have
let
Trump
me ask you, Rick.
show
Rick,
that.
how do you see this playing out? When do you think, you've said forever that Trump was going to be the nominee. So just walk us through how you see the kind of, every campaign has its own rhythm, its own
Sure.
timetable. Um,
I mean, the real thing that's going on here, I think, and we talked about this a little bit last week. If Ron DeSantis and Chris Christie dropped out of the race, Nikki Haley could probably win the first couple states. Now, because they're bleeding her on the bottom end, I don't think she can do it. But she's going to, as Joe says, I'm convinced Nikki's going to really overperform. My bet is New Hampshire is going to be a shocker how close it is, and it's a sign that although Trump structurally still has all the marbles in this thing, because look, let's go through. Let's say there was a miracle and Nikki Haley had a trifecta on of the first three races. Just say
You
there's a
mean
miracle.
like it was 4th and 31 in Alabama versus
Similar to
Alabama?
that,
Yeah,
yes.
right,
Um,
right.
Long story short, Donald Trump goes into Super Tuesday, where he's 50 points ahead in Texas,
Yeah.
where he's 47 points ahead in California. He wraps up North Carolina, California, and Texas that day, which is almost 15% of the vote. He also, on the 19th, is going to win Florida going away. He's going to win Ohio, probably going away. The problem for Nikki now is she can do a lot of damage to Trump and hurt him a lot, and folks should hope she stays in the race, because the longer she's in, the more embarrassed he gets. The uglier his responses will get, the crazier he'll get. But I think by the time you get once Florida is over, once Florida and Ohio go on the 19th of March, it's a really narrow path for anybody else to do anything. And at that point, DeSantis not leaving the race will be seen as the stupidest political move of the non-Trump forces of all time.
Mm-hmm.
But he ain't leaving the race. But so Nikki's sort of the flavor of the moment. And as Joe has said, she's going to really surprise people, I think, in a couple of places. Trump had a very bad weekend in South Carolina. He was booed. She had a major event down there that turned out at thousands of people.
Yeah,
So there
so
is a
wait,
little
pause,
momentum there.
Rick. As the man who is what do you call it, the anthropologist of the worst person in the world or something?
Yeah.
Why did Trump get that reaction at that game? Is it just that the sports figures, politicians always get booed at sports figures?
Listen, it's like the only Yankee
Sports
game
figures?
I ever went to where a celebrity wasn't booed was George Bush right after 9/11.
Yeah,
Right.
You know,
true.
sports events are always a dodgy thing. People boo to be, just to have some fun with it. But he didn't. I mean, Nikki's people clearly staffed ahead of time
Yeah.
to have the signs and all the trolling going on, which I will say is a sign of a campaign that's got some oomph and some competence. Um, and look, again, if Ron DeSantis and Chris Christie weren't in the race, remember Donald Trump is under 50 in Iowa. He's under 50 in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
There are a
Mhm.
lot of Republicans who want an alternative in these early states. The problem is when you get to Super Tuesday, those are really Trumpy states.
All right. So you think it'll be wound up by when? April 1?
I think it's over March 25th.
All right. So
I,
March
I think
25th.
I mean,
I
there's two things, Stuart. One is, and you guys know this, but your party, your ex party better than I do, but
You got
they've
to
got
rub it in,
winner,
right, Joe?
they've got winner, no, but they've got winner take all.
right.
It's much different than the Democratic side where everything's
That's
proportional. And so
right.
that gives Trump a huge leg up, even if she's moving. It's likely. I think Rick's right. It's much. You'd have to still give it. Odds are Trump, because of the way their system works. Trump still, wins enough of those winner take all states that it's over pretty, relatively
And
soon.
so do you think in that period, if you go back to the history of incumbent presidents, it's different uh, before when we had federal funding because these candidates would emerge broke, like Dole
Sure.
emerged broke and Clinton
Right.
killed him.
Right.
Um, do you, Mondale had that problem.
Yeah.
In June and July of 2012, Obama spent more on television than the Bush and Kerry campaign combined spent in the
Yep.
entire campaign.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which I
Think
don't know
about
if
this:
it made
Bush
a
and
difference.
Dukakis together spent less than $100 million in
Yeah.
'88.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know
No,
if it
this will
made a
be
difference, but
billions. This
it
will be
sure felt
billions.
like it. So, how do you see the Biden campaign gaming this? Do you think that they're going to uh, immediately go on the attack against Trump as soon as he gets the nomination? You think they're going to wait that long?
I
How do
think
you?
they should go sooner than that. My
Mhm.
view. I'd start now. I'd start now. I'd start hitting. I'd start pounding away um, on on not on the usual contrast stuff, but I would do what we do, which is to assert what a Trump second term looks like for America.
Right.
I would
To
wrap
make put it
I
in
would wrap
people's
the
face.
fascism up in it. I would
Right.
wrap Mike Johnson up in it.
Yep.
and show people what they're gonna be facing. Which is why I tell Democrats all the time. I was just on a call a little while ago with a bunch of very well-meaning Democrats, and I made it very clear. It's like policy is not going to win this for you. It's the contrast with Trump
Right.
that will win it for you. It's making the race about Trump's vision for the future. And Tom Nichols had a great piece today um, that Biden's not as much of a showman as Trump, and that can be deadly politically. That's true. That's why Lincoln Project and other groups exist to go out and do the spectacle stuff to
Right.
attack Trump and to draw him into fights that he doesn't want to be in, but that he can't resist engaging with. So, I think,
Yeah.
So do you guys think if you're sitting there and you've got $100 million to spend, they're actually going to have 2 billion, but let's say 100 million
yeah,
because do that math
cash on hand.
on media, and we can have another discussion about how much of that would be digital versus traditional television or cable. Um, what percentage would you allocate to straight positives, to straight negatives, and to contrast? What do you think? If you were the Biden campaign?
The Biden campaign,
Yeah.
I would do contrast the whole way.
Yeah, I do
The whole
contrast.
way. So no straight only
I
the
do
negative.
contrast. Biden is
Yeah.
jobs, peace, and freedom. Trump is fascism and darkness,
And
Yeah.
chaos.
chaos. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, one I would be doing is Ukraine, Russia, Ukraine, Putin. Why? If you started to go now, because that is where part of the schism is going to be, and if Nikki Haley starts to take,
Right. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
so to sort of just keep driving that, so that anybody who's listening to her or any other candidate, and there's plenty of voices out there, even the speaker is talking Ukraine, but weirdly, I get that. But my
Yeah.
point is, I think that's a real divide, generationally or not, within, that's a wedge that's developing, particularly if Nikki takes off. And I would be making sure, I mean, not just that one, but looking for things like that where Biden is on the side of that equation in a way that some of those voters decide later on become more of a growing Bannon line that come to him when the contrast is stark in November.
Yeah, I kind of like that idea of jobs, peace, and freedom.
Yep.
And I know it's the March on Washington logo or motto, but hell,
So
worked pretty
Rick,
well once before.
let me ask you a question. How do you think, if at all, what's happening in Israel and Gaza is going to play out in the election? Do you think this is something we're going to be talking about in a year?
You know what? I in 2022, I looked for it a few times in surveys at the end of 2022. Afghanistan, which I was assured by the media and by the Republicans
All right.
that was going to be the central issue of Biden's failed presidency in the 2022 election, was not even statistically measurable as an issue.
Right. As an issue.
I think we're going to be in the same kind of category. I think there's an attention span problem for all foreign policy questions, unless they are a hot war like Ukraine, that people just don't stay focused on it longer than a few weeks or days. And I think there's a degree of wear and tear in people's psyche that Gaza's. And I mean this. This sounds horrible, but it's shallow but true. It's not as photogenic a combat situation as Ukraine is, or as a real hot shooting war looks like.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like grinding urban combat, same thing all day, one color palette. And I again, I don't want to sound as superficial as it is, but I know human beings, and and it's complex and it's nuanced. And to the credit of the administration and of the Israelis, they haven't let the hostage thing become a daily news flow item where people are focused only on that issue. So I think it's going to have a limited shelf life. That's my sort of cynical take on it.
I also think it's way too early to even know. I don't mean that.
No,
I
I
agree
do
with what you're
that
saying,
too,
Rick.
for
But
sure.
what I mean
Mm-hmm.
is we don't know if this truce continues for another 3 or 4 days. We don't know if there's a bigger super deal to get all the hostages out in exchange
Right.
for Palestinian prisoners, a large number of them.
Sure.
We don't know that whether that evolves into a real kind of peace summit or something. Not I'm not talking about peace breaking out around the world. I'm just talking
Right.
about some kind of
About like a
stuff that
two-state solution idea or something like that.
it starts to move. If any of that, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Given
Right.
given the prowess so far of, I mean, look, I said when we started that the Biden administration's taken hits on both sides on how they've handled it. But just if you can see how the temperature on how to read what he's doing has gone down with each
Mm-hmm.
diplomatic success. That diplomatic prowess, getting those carriers there, using military might and our diplomatic might, um, in a very, in a way that's one so far kept it from expanding into a regional conflict,
Yep.
and two, successfully, getting a truce in place with that we don't know how long it will continue or what the outcome of it will be, but it just again I think sending Burns to Qatar today,
Yep.
uh, you know, it just shows what competent diplomacy and the use
Yeah,
of our
and
military power
you
can
know,
accomplish.
if you go back to that Republican debate where they were in a bidding war over who could bomb whom the most,
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, by the end, the way I figured it, we were at war with Mexico. I like our odds in that war, but I'm not really sure it's entirely necessary. And we have, what they're going to take San Antonio again, and definitely at war with Iran. And I really don't think Americans are just really eager to go to war with Iran or Mexico for that matter.
Iran and
Um,
Mexico both are probably more complicated than the Trump people think.
yeah,
yeah,
it
I
would
just don't.
create a lot of refugees south of
Yeah,
the
I
border.
mean,
They
Right.
want to do that. Yeah,
are
smart.
people nostalgic for? We had a war for 20 plus years. People nostalgic for that. I don't hear a lot of people saying like, I really miss the war in Iraq.
Right.
Like those were the good old days.
Hey
Um,
guys, looping back on the primary for 1 second, I wanted
Sure.
to discuss. We were talking about money, Stuart, and I was remiss
yeah,
in mentioning this earlier. The Koch network has gotten behind Nikki Haley as of today. Now, that's through the Americans for Freedom, for
yep.
AFP action. They're going to flood in an awful lot of media money for Nikki. They don't have time. Look, we've got 45 days to go now, I guess, as of tomorrow morning. They don't really have time to go into these states and organize a lot for her. How much of a difference do you guys think a big splashy media campaign from an outside group that is sort of apostate Republican, trying to push Nikki? They're going to try to call Trump a liberal and say Trump's not a true conservative, etc. How effective do you think that's going to work out for them?
Yeah, I like Mexico's chances against the United States more.
Yeah.
No, I think I would bet on Mexico and give the points.
I mean, is this in
Um,
Iowa and New Hampshire? Where are they doing this?
Well, Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, from what I read
Yeah.
today.
I
Yeah.
do
I
think
mean,
that
in
I do
Iowa,
think that
it's all ground
DeSantis.
game. It's all
Yeah.
ground game in Iowa. Any of this TV stuff is just a waste of time and money. But I
And it's
guess
like, how many people could you flood the zone within Iowa now who haven't been
yeah,
hired by either DeSantis
yeah,
or Haley?
Yeah,
yeah,
people don't real. The difference between first and third in Iowa is going to be 4,000 votes.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
going to be a
It's
moderate sized
crazy small
university
numbers.
student body election. But I do think that a campaign like that, if I was them, I would go after DeSantis because your
Sure.
goal is to be the alternative to Trump. And I think that you can take more votes out of DeSantis than you can take out of Trump. Not to go back to ancient history, but when I was working for the Dole campaign in in '96, we Lamar Alexander came in third in Iowa, which was seen as a big bump for him, and
Right.
we rolled into New Hampshire, and Buchanan was in first place, Dole was in second, and Alexander was in third. We attacked Alexander
Right.
because we knew that if it came down to Buchanan and Dole, ultimately Dole could win. If it came down to Dole and Buchanan, I mean Dole and Alexander, Lamar could win.
Right.
So we attacked the
Well,
guy behind us, not ahead of us.
Is that
yeah,
what
And
I
broke up
think
your beautiful friendship with Mike Murphy?
I think Iowa could play
I'm
out.
speaking Republican to the audience for a second, y'all. That's just an inside joke.
life imitating high school.
I think this is the bank shot that I see. I think that Haley's probably already by DeSantis there, just based on the last poll. 42 for Trump, 16 for DeSantis, 16 for her, and 7 were for Scott. Scott's out now. I know that the Scott vote, the pollsters say it splits 3 ways: Trump, DeSantis, and her. But I still think more of it leaks to her than the
Yeah,
other.
you want to win your own
So,
state.
right. So, well, I'm talking about Iowa here. I think
Iowa,
now.
yeah.
So he's at 7. I think that's all bleeding. A lot of it's bleeding to her, which means she's already by DeSantis. I think the interesting thing was, Vanderplat moving to DeSantis, because you gotta believe that could take some evangelical votes away from Trump, and in the hopes of getting DeSantis by her. But I think this could all work for her, because if he's at 42 now, and that endorsement pulls 2 points, 1.3 points
Yeah.
off of you can look at what that did for Santorum and for Huckabee in 2008, 2012, I guess it was. You're looking at I think DeSantis could pull down on Trump a little, by
Yeah, but look,
by
Joe,
and which means if she can beat DeSantis there, you could be looking at it like Trump at 38 in Iowa and her at like 22 or something,
no, I think
and
she'll be
that's
hired. I think she'll be
yeah.
higher than that.
Though
But
that's
look,
so
here's a dirty little
that
secret.
means you're now on your way to New Hampshire, and then we're seeing Rick's thing play out, where puts a scare in New Hampshire. You go to South Carolina, but then you hit the winner take all. But here's the one thing: the winner take all can also work the other way. I mean, if Trump just comes down off those 57 numbers and 56 down to 49, I mean, because he's losing, because he's made the panic that ensues,
Hmm.
and she could, that's how you get to some weird thing that none of us are seeing right now, where it starts devolving to one on one, but he's still got a tough time getting,
Look,
even if it's
let me just
57
let
43,
me
Right,
just
right.
as somebody who spent far too much of his life dealing with Vanderplat. One of the secrets was it was a lot easier to get evangelicals to be against a Mormon in 2008
Yeah,
and
that's true.
Right.
2012. And I'm not saying that Vanderplant's endorsement's for sale, but I'm saying if there was a political eBay, that
Yeah.
would be posted
You're
there.
saying that his skirt can be hiked up to the
I
appropriate
think
height
I
Yeah.
when
think
necessary.
certainly a short-term rental
Well, I am
um,
talking about,
could be arranged.
but I'm also
And
talking
he's
about three
also, hold on
points.
a sec, he's also never, ever endorsed a candidate who won the nomination.
Yep.
That's okay.
It's a proof that rats do jump on sinking ships.
No, but that's all. Both of those points are good and okay, because we're talking about, can he pull 3 points of evangelicals, 2 points, 3 points off of a guy who's at 42, give them to a guy who's at 16, so he's at 19, and she gets 27, and she looks much closer to Trump, and is on her way. I'm just saying there could be, because I mean, and by the way, I've been in the multi-candidate thing in Iowa. Got it. Dean getting into it with Dick Gephardt turns into a murder
Hmm.
suicide pact. There are these unintended bank shots that could happen, and I'm starting to see one that could develop even further to her benefit and hurt Trump. We'll see. But
I think if DeSantis got hit by a meteorite tomorrow, all bets are off.
Yeah.
But if, as long as he
So
sticks
Rick,
in,
I
it's
got
going
to
to be.
ask you, you're not hearing anything about him getting out?
I'm hearing the opposite, that donors have gone to him, major donors have gone to him and said, "Listen, it's not your time. You're young. We'll help you. We'll put you on some boards. You'll make some money." And it's like, go fuck yourself. Casey says no. So look, they were down. They started another super PAC over the weekend because the first super PAC has burned in $80 million. So they started another super PAC, and they're out trying to get another $50 million into it, which I can't imagine where it's going to come from. But they started a new super PAC because Jeff Rowe has spent all the money in the first super PAC. Astounding. So,
Yeah,
well,
Casey
guys, listen,
DeSantis. I mean,
we're getting on towards 40 minutes in. I want to take
yeah.
a couple audience questions real quick. So let's fire up some audience questions. Everything. Look, this is why it will. Turnout has to overcompensate for voter suppression. So you can't model like what you need to win. You need to model what you need to crush. That's just the fundamental underpinning of all of it. Don't go for the win, go for the kill, because voter suppression stuff is real. It's out there.
That's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yep.
If you
Yep.
believe it can, it can.
Yep. Yep. Okay, let's hit another one. Okay. Bannon line voters are non-Trump Republicans. They tend to be more female, more affluent, more suburban. They tend to be independent conservative men who are not as deeply involved in the Republican Party. They tend to be softer Republican men. Tend to be more educated, tend to be more suburban. Bannon line voters are the bread and butter of what the Lincoln Project does.
Mhm.
They are the target audience that we can move. They're about 7 to 11% of the overall pool of voters in the country, and they are the vital play in this election because it allows you in these closely divided electoral college states to go in where we don't have to move a million voters in Wisconsin. We have to move 80,000 voters in Brown County and the WOW counties around Milwaukee.
Right.
So, yeah, no,
And
Lee,
they're
no female has ever followed Steve Bannon except female vultures.
no, and they're movable voters too. I mean,
Yeah,
these are
they're movable
voters.
voters. Yeah, they're
They're
gettable.
yeah, they're gettable. They're voters that have real problems with Trump and Trumpism and MAGA
Yep,
on a bunch of different issues. Potentially, for instance, Dobbs, et cetera. I mean, there's
yep,
and Putin, Ukraine. I mean, different.
And I think they
But
don't like the anger.
right, and you can exactly in the chaos, and you can reach them digitally, repeatedly, over and over. In a much more targeted fashion, much more efficiently, with a lot of repetition on key messages that move them in the move them. It reinforced, by the way, why they are looking for some alternative to Trump in the MAGA party. And so they need to be reminded of that. And at the same time, the Democrat, and in this case Biden, which is good, has to be somebody who doesn't scare the hell out of them right back into the party. And the Democrats are capable of doing that in some of these
correct.
House races. But Biden is it's one of the reasons I think Biden's going to do better than people think. I think the Bannon line has expanded, and Biden is exactly his persona. That the thing everybody else says old and boring and all that makes him not
Yep,
as scary and acceptable. And by the way, he's right on a lot of these issues that are scaring the hell out of these, and the chaos that's making them movable in the first place. So the
yep,
Bannon line's getting bigger. Joe Biden's the right candidate to pull them. We got to do our job, and LP does a great job at going after these voters. It's one of the reasons I joined the Lincoln Project with you guys, because I think you talk to these, and it's helped me learn how to talk to these voters a lot more than I've ever learned working on the Democratic side. They just don't have the insight into
right.
how to tackle these voters and to move them over.
Right. Well, with that, folks, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. One last thing: it is Giving Tuesday. I think we have one more graphic. If you are interested in supporting some really, really good groups, on Giving Tuesday. Pen America, votewriters.org. Full disclosure, I am on the board of Vote Writers. It's a great voter registration or voter ID group that provides voter IDs for folks in states where it's harder and harder to get a photo ID because Republicans don't want certain people to vote. And of course, Voters of Tomorrow, a great group reaching out to Gen Z and younger voters. Hope you'll support these folks or others of your choice on Giving Tuesday. And we look forward to seeing you again on the strategy session next week. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Thanks.
Take care, everybody.
Make sure you turn in to the enemies list in that Trippy show.